If you've got travel anxiety and you're really looking for a proven way to overcome it, then you are definitely in the right place today. My name is Ty Hicks, founder of Mental Health Coaching. I am really glad you're here, and I'm not going to waste your time with a long intro. Let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So, as you can see, the title of today's presentation is Free from Travel Anxiety in 90 Days. The method 612 people have used when therapy, medication, and coping mechanisms failed them, all by identifying the hidden game that your subconscious keeps playing in rewriting the rules, which I know may sound a little silly, but we'll get into that. So, right out of the gate, I just want to say that if I had heard someone claim that travel anxiety could be overcome in 90 days back when I was still struggling with my issue, my anxiety myself, I really would have thought to myself, like, there's just absolutely no way. This is total BS. How in the world can this guy claim that something I've been struggling with for years could really be overcome in just a couple of months? And I just want to point out right away that if you are skeptical, I totally get it. I think that's a very reasonable response. I mean, after all, you have probably tried just about everything that you can think of to deal with the anxiety already. And you probably have no clue who I am, how this process works. So, of course, it's not going to sound very believable to you right away. But I do want to assure you that we do have a lot of proof that this works. So, for starters, I used to have extreme anxiety for years. And the method that I'm going to be teaching you today really helped me finally overcome my anxiety when therapy, medication, and coping mechanisms just did not work. And then additionally, in the past 8 years of doing this professionally, I've actually had 612 clients that I've worked with one on one. And what we do is we survey them before they use the method I'm going to be teaching you today to assess how severe their anxiety is and also how often it pops up for them. And then we survey them after they've finished implementing our system. And the typical minimum result that they report is a reduction in the severity and the frequency of at least 75%. So most clients do much better than the 75%, but that's kind of the standard minimum average that our client will hit. We can very reliably hit that and exceed it very often. And again, if that sounds unbelievable, totally get it. It's all good. But I just want to let you know that at any time you can always go to our website anytime you'd like, and you can see that we have 241 documented case studies and testimonials where people describe their experience in their own words. You can see the video interviews we've done with people. Also, we've maintained a 5-star rating online for 8 years as I've been doing this. And the results we produce with this method are all completely transparent, just like, unlike any other kind of company that's out there helping people with their mental health. So at any time, you can go to ty-hicks.com/testimonies. You can see it all right there if you like. And while we do have hundreds of documented, proven case studies of the method that I'm going to be teaching you today working for all types of anxiety, I've basically seen it all many times. Travel anxiety is actually one of the most common types of issues that our clients come to us to have them solve and that we use this method for. And today I'm going to be showing you why travel anxiety feels so persistent, so exhausting, why everything else that you've tried is probably just not really meeting the mark for you. Because the truth I really want you to understand is that if you are struggling with travel anxiety, it really is not your fault. It's not because you're broken. It's not because you're destined to feel like this forever. It's because you've been following a system more than likely that was really never designed to actually fix the problem. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk about exactly how to do that. Now, first off, who is this for? Just so you know you're in the right place. Well, really, this is for anybody who is struggling with travel anxiety. If you have tried therapy, medication, or different coping skills and still feel like you're kind of trapped in a cycle of avoidance, maybe those things have helped a little bit, but just not really enough to really give you that like real freedom, you know what I mean? Or maybe you're simply looking for a way to overcome the anxiety that you feel away from being at home, and you want to do that in a way where you're not relying on medication or therapy. This is also for you if just thinking about traveling, whether by car, plane, or train, if it really like starts to make your heart race, if the idea of being far from home, stuck in traffic, or thousands of feet in the air, like sends your mind spiraling. And then also, if you avoid trips, road travel, airports, simple getaways, even not because you don't want to, but because you're terrified of feeling trapped, with no way out if the anxiety hits and really gets high enough. If you find yourself obsessively planning every stop, every route, every just in case scenario, hoping it'll give you a shred of control over the panic, right? This is definitely for you. And this is for you if, even though part of you knows you're physically safe, your body still feels like disaster is like just around the corner the second that you leave your comfort zone, basically. Also, if you feel like you're putting your life on pause and not experiencing all that you can, then this is for you. Maybe your relationships are suffering because you can't seem to go far away, or you can't spend time with friends or family the way that you'd like to, or maybe it's just that you really just want some variety and some fun in your life, but you basically feel trapped. So if any of that hits home, I want you to know I see you, I understand. I have been there. And what you're about to hear really could change everything for you because it has for hundreds of people like you previously. And so, what's going to be different about today is that this is not going to be me explaining some, surface level coping mechanisms. Today, we're actually going to be answering the most important question for overcoming your travel anxiety. Now, whether you realize this is the most important question for overcoming your anxiety or not, this definitely is what it is. Okay. And so here's the real question that we need to answer. How do we stop trying to respond to every anxious thought that we have and instead make it so that the mind stops generating anxious thoughts to begin with? Okay, that's really the key question that we have to answer because if you have travel anxiety, you already know that your mind continuously has automatic negative thoughts that are totally involuntary anytime you're about to even consider going somewhere new and far from home. And you probably waste a ton of time and energy constantly reacting to those automatic thoughts and trying to manage them. And so the entire idea behind a coping mechanism is to be able to respond to those anxious thoughts in a way that brings some sort of relief, basically. But if you think about it, if you knew how to finally address the true source of the travel anxiety, where now your mind is no longer automatically generating the anxious thoughts to begin with, well, you'd basically have no more limitations on being able to live the life that you want to live, couldn't you? Right? You'd have really no more need for all of the coping mechanisms either. But I do want to take this just one step further. So, not just how do we do this, and not just how do we do this in 90 days or less, but also how do we do this in a simple, easy, common sense, proven way that's really going to last, right? How do we do this without you having to rely on band-aid solutions like medication, where you trade one unwanted feeling for an unwanted side effect? How do we do this without you feeling like you are just sitting in a room with a therapist, talking about the same stuff over and over, waiting endlessly to be given some clarity, to be given a real plan, when instead it just feels like you're kind of spinning your wheels forever? How do we do this without doing something completely bizarre, like a total Hail Mary, like hypnosis, energy work, acupuncture, any of these other kind of crazy things you see out in the world that, hey, I am sure that they provide some value for some people, but let's be honest, they're not really dealing with the source of the problem. And how do we do this without exerting a lot of effort, like using some crazy exposure therapy system might have you do, which, as you probably know, the exposure therapy thing doesn't really work for most people? That's the real question that we're going to answer today. So, just in case you think that isn't possible to do, let me just take one extra second to introduce myself real quick, just because I really want to make sure that you get that this really is possible. And the belief that overcoming anxiety is not possible is usually the number one thing that keeps people from overcoming it, right? Because you'll never solve a problem that you believe is unsolvable. It causes us to just stay stuck and stay still and not do anything different. So, like I said a second ago, my name is Ty Hicks. I'm the founder of Mental Health Coaching, and I had debilitating anxiety for many years, made me suicidal, in fact, and it landed me in a psych hospital for 10 days. And at the time, I tried therapy, multiple medications for years. They did not really work for me. It was only once I developed the process I'm going to be teaching you today, I finally really overcame my anxiety. And I've since stayed anxiety free for 15 plus years, right? And counting, all without medications, therapy, or any other coping mechanisms. And, don't get me wrong, right? My life is not like perfect or anything. I'm still human. I have the occasional negative thought or feeling here or there. But the difference is I just no longer have anxiety. I no longer have that repetitive, chronic, limiting fear going on. It just doesn't, it's not there for me. The only thing that happens is just the normal stuff, that you're supposed to have, like feeling a little worried when maybe like a car like legitimately almost hits me in traffic, something like that. But even then, I'll feel a little nervous for a couple seconds and then I'll feel calm again right away, just like you're supposed to. And as I said, over the past 8 years, I've helped 612 clients use the process I'm going to share with you. I even had the opportunity to teach this to Olympic athlete Abby Napton to help her overcome her performance anxiety and land a spot on the diving team of Team USA, which was really cool. And because our process is working better than anything else out there, I've gotten a ton of copycats over the years, but almost no one gets this right. And what I'm going to be doing is showing you the fastest, most effective way to do this and get it done. So before I dig into that, let's quickly talk for a second about what doesn't work because unfortunately 90% or more of what's being taught in the mental health industry today, it just simply doesn't work. It takes way too long, but people have no clue that there's a much simpler, easier, and more effective alternative available. And I want to cover this with you because there's so many ads out there, there's so much content, there's so many people trying to rope you into one strategy or another. And I really wouldn't be doing my job as an industry leader if I didn't make it really clear to you what works and what doesn't. So, what's happening in the industry right now is that there's basically three main things that have occurred recently that are really leading people astray and ruining their mental health. I'm sure you've seen some of this. So, the first thing that's going on is there's been some changes to what's happening with prescription medication. So, firstly, the rate of prescriptions being thrown at anxious people has really never been higher. So, ever since the COVID pandemic several years ago, more and more people are getting prescribed anti-anxiety medication, even though the results that those medications produce has never been lower. So, a study done by behavioral health business found that antidepressant prescriptions, which are commonly prescribed for anxiety as well, increased by approximately 21% from 2019 to 2022, with a notable rise in telehealth prescriptions from 1.5% in 2019 to 31.4% in 2022. And that trend has continued ever since. And that's because, well-meaning people like yourself who just want to feel some sort of relief mistakenly believe that the source of their anxiety is biochemical, even though this has been empirically proven to be false many, many times. So let me explain, because most people have no clue about this. So, a recent peer reviewed medical meta study, which is basically the highest caliber of credible academic research out there, that means this research was conducted by people with medical degrees. And then also it was submitted for peer review and peer reviewed, right, by other academics. And basically, what was found by the University of College London is, quote, there is no conclusive evidence that low serotonin levels cause depression or anxiety. Despite the popularity of the serotonin theory, research suggests no significant difference in serotonin activity between those with and without depression or anxiety. Additionally, the chemical imbalance theory was heavily promoted by pharmaceutical companies in the 1990s to market SSRIs, even though studies now show that SSRIs do not correct a serotonin imbalance because there is no imbalance to begin with. Clinical trials have demonstrated that antidepressants, SSRIs, are often barely distinguishable from placebos in terms of effectiveness. End quote. So that's all from the University of College London. And then additionally, even more research has shown that the serotonin imbalance theory is not supported by scientific evidence and should no longer be presented as a factual explanation. of depression or anxiety. That's from Molecular Psychiatry. And then from Science Daily, quote, SSRIs and similar treatments only have any kind of positive effect in about 50% of patients, and only 25% achieve full symptom relief. Which that right there is really the big nugget that you want to remember, because that's the thing that really applies to you. So only about 50% of the population experience any kind of positive result, and only 25% experience full symptom relief. And so if you've already tried the medication route, then you already know that you've not maybe had good personal experience. But what I want you to understand is that the statistical likelihood that the anxiety is really going to get dealt with through medication is just exceptionally low. It only happens for 25% of the population. And what's interesting is that even though all of this has been reproven in the early 2020s, early to mid 2020s, it was actually proven previously as well back in 2015 and even as early as 2005. This whole chemical imbalance theory has been debunked. So in 2015, one pair of researchers found that, quote, the FDA had originally accepted aspirational language that the drugs help to restore the brain's chemical balance and bring serotonin levels closer to normal, even though both claims were and remain scientifically meaningless. There is no such thing as a scientifically established correct balance of serotonin. So, this whole idea that anxiety was caused by a biochemical imbalance and could be corrected by medication is a myth. It was sold to the public, it was never proven. It has been disproven at least 3 times in the last 25 years. And what's fascinating, though, is that most people don't know this. Why? Well, I think a big reason is you'll see 5 to 10 ads a day for anti-anxiety or antidepressant medication, but how often, do you see an advertisement like sharing the actual medical facts, right? It's just very rare. So people are still bombarded with these messages that you can still create relief, and some people do experience some relief, but the vast majority of people are just not getting sufficient relief, and they don't know why. Okay. Also, when SSRIs are not working, particularly for people with travel anxiety, the usual next route to go is a benzodiazepine, commonly referred to as a benzo, something like a Xanax or a Klonopin. But what's interesting is those are being proven to be equally as ineffective. So this is from a journal called Psychological Medicine. Quote, a 2023 meta-analysis found that only one of 5 clinical trials showed a positive efficacy outcome, while the rest were negative and did not demonstrate effectiveness. So that means only 1 in 5 people are really getting sufficient results with benzos. And usually with benzos, Xanax or Klonopin, it's prescribed as an as needed situation. And so it creates this kind of sense of dependence usually. And there's like, especially if you wanted to take like a long trip or something like that, it usually is not super sufficient, right, to create that. And you still have all the anxiety leading up to it, maybe anxiety while you are still away. It doesn't really create that lasting relief. It just sort of helps you keep things at bay and be able to do the activity without really fully enjoying the activity. Okay. Now, I do want to be very clear, right? I don't blame doctors and psychiatrists for prescribing this stuff, even though the data is there to show it's really just not that effective. I'm not trying to get you riled up and mad at your doctors. It's important to understand that doctors and psychiatrists largely do 3 things, right? Number one, they try to help their patients feel better with whatever tools they have available. And those tools are very often imperfect tools. Number two, they recommend things that other doctors are doing to help their patients. So this is a very common thing in the medical industry is a doctor will know, for example, that, other doctors are recommending some new drug. And so they go, okay, well, let's try this drug. I think it might be working. I see other people are doing this. And then third, what they tend to do is they keep recommending what they are used to recommending, right? There's a lot of inertia in the medical industry. And there's been studies that have shown that the time it takes for like a new innovative way to do something to finally reach like the mainstream medical doctor practice is anywhere between 12 and 15 years. So there's just a very long period of lag time between when the research is done and it's kind of shown like this is not the most effective way to do things, and until that gets into your general physician's doctor's office practice. So it's not their fault really. Here's what one psychiatrist actually had to say about this when they were interviewed by researchers. So this was from psychiatrist Daniel Carlat. This was an interview done by Science Daily. So he said, quote, "We don't," referring to psychiatrists, "we don't know how the medications actually work in the brain. I'll often say something like the way Zoloft works is it increases the level of serotonin in your brain. And presumably, the reason you're depressed or anxious is that you have some sort of a deficiency. And I tell that to patients not because I really believe it, because I know the evidence really isn't there for us to understand the mechanism. I think I say that because patients want to know something. And they want to know that as physicians, we have some basic understanding of what we're doing when we are prescribing medications. They certainly don't want to know that a psychiatrist essentially has no idea how these medications work. Okay. So, end quote. So, in short, doctors are just doing what doctors are trained to do, right? Diagnose and prescribe medication. They don't know how to actually get to the root of the subconscious problem, because it's just not their expertise. It's not their specialty. And they look at anxiety and travel anxiety, especially, as if it's just like the same as diabetes or heart disease or some kind of, like heart murmur or something like that. And it's not, right? So they prescribe drugs because they're trying to use any tool in their tool belt to create results. But remember, the bottom line here is the SSRIs and similar treatments are only somewhat effective in about 50% of patients, and only 25% achieve full symptom relief. And the thing is, like, no one knows this, right? So people with travel anxiety, they simply assume that their doctors are giving them a solution to their problem when they get a prescription. They really have no clue that it's statistically very unlikely to help at all, and almost certainly not going to help solve the problem. Okay, so not only that, but medical research has linked anti-anxiety medication with an increased chance of developing Alzheimer's, cardiovascular issues, cognitive impairment, dementia, and of course, the really, really scary stuff like serotonin syndrome, tardive dyskinesia, where you lose motor control of your body, not to mention the physical dependence it creates and the need to slowly taper off. So, what a lot of people are doing, especially these days, is they're doing what I call playing the pharmaceutical lottery, right? They think that they should just kind of continue to tweak the dosages, keep trying to adjust the actual prescriptions, and that basically they'll eventually find the right medication cocktail eventually. And, that does work for some people, but most people will waste months or years tweaking these things only to get very small improvements in their results. And it doesn't really go much farther than that. So when we kind of take a step back, we really want to ask ourselves, like, why in the world would we ingest something into our body for years and years that isn't even solving the problem? It gives us weird side effects. Most doctors agree you won't be able to take it forever anyway, and it literally causes your body to have a physical addiction to it, right? I mean, it just does not really make sense. So I do want to be 100% clear though, right? I am not in any way recommending that you go to your medicine cabinet, flush your pills down the drain. Not saying to do that. Please do not do that. Even for the clients that we work with one-on-one, or for the people who apply the method I'm going to teach you today, we always tell them, like, you got to get to the real source of the anxiety first before you want to start to reasonably and responsibly wean off of the medication. Okay. Because otherwise, you're going to have a complication due to a withdrawal. That's not good. So, do not stop taking your prescribed medication. Do not start weaning off of it until you take the steps needed to address the real problem, or else you're going to make things much, much worse. Okay. So, I want you to just remember and know that if you have been trying to solve your anxiety problem with medication and it hasn't worked, that doesn't mean you're defective, right? It doesn't mean you have something wrong with you. All it means is you are part of the 75% of the population that medication is insufficient for, and that's not your fault. Okay, so medication is leaving people high and dry. It certainly did for me. So, what other options is the industry providing these days? Well, a lot of people are turning to therapy as they have for hundreds of years. And therapy is in an interesting space right now. So, firstly, It's important to understand that therapy is by far the oldest method out there for trying to deal with anxiety. It was literally created in the late 1880s. And what most people don't realize is that in many ways, it hasn't changed all that much since then. So, in a lot of ways, it is very ancient. One thing that people don't know is that there's been a lot of hope recently because therapy seems to be experiencing this sort of like renaissance of new methods and approaches. That's what people's perception is. But the thing is that it's mostly smoke and mirrors. This really has to do more with the fact that there's innovation going on in marketing methods, not innovation in the core method being used. And so there's big companies basically that have made talk therapy more accessible through telehealth, like Talkspace and BetterHelp and companies like that. And on top of that, in the past 20 or so years, there have been very slight variations of the talk therapy model that have popped up. So things like DBT, EMDR, hypnotherapy, and the like. And a lot of people believe that these variations are like the missing link, right, that have kept them from their anxiety recovery. But what's interesting is when you actually look at the data, the overwhelming amount of people are just not finding talk therapy or these variations to be sufficient. So, according to the National Health Service over in England, quote, despite the widespread use of talk therapy, improvement rates for anxiety remain below 50%, indicating the need for more comprehensive treatment options. That means that the majority of people who try to use talk therapy for their anxiety do not get results or sufficient results, certainly. Okay. That statistic right there is the number of people that see any kind of improvement, let alone like sufficient improvement. It's a very much smaller percentage of the population. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, quote, many patients report feeling that they have plateaued with talk therapy after several months, with dissatisfaction stemming from its inability, to address the root cause of the anxiety, particularly in more severe cases. And patients often report that while talk therapy helps them cope, it doesn't provide the tools necessary to fully overcome their anxiety. So, in the 8 years of my professional career, I've done about 21,000 hours of documented consulting and coaching with people who have really every kind of severe anxiety variation that there is. And well over 75% of the people I've spoken with report that therapy has been somewhat helpful, but is far from sufficient to provide them lasting relief. While some people find therapy very helpful, there is a substantial portion of the population who just never find therapy to be sufficient. And especially for travel anxiety, talk therapy is notoriously insufficient. So why is it that so many people are not getting results, right? Like what in the world is going on here? Well, what most people with anxiety don't know is that there are two key things that really keep therapists from being able to truly help some patients experience lasting results, even though the therapists themselves truly care deeply about their patients and they want what is best for them. It's neither the therapist's fault or the patient's fault. It's just that the entire system has some major limits baked into it. They really keep it from working for everybody. And so the first one is what we call the broken patient myth. Now, the broken patient myth is that therapists are trained that anxiety is a lifelong condition that cannot be overcome. Now, mind you, that theory is over 200 years old. So, the basis of classifying anxiety as a permanent disorder, that was Sigmund Freud's work in the 1880s. This has been disproven many times since then, especially in the past 10 years. At the time he came up with this theory that anxiety was just something you cannot get rid of, cigarettes were being prescribed to treat asthma. Okay, that's how much we had figured out back then. Bloodletting was still being used as a medical practice back then, and also lobotomies were rising in popularity. That's what happened. So now, of course, therapists don't do things exactly, right, like Freud did back then, but there are certain assumptions that are still held on to today. including the idea that whatever the variation of anxiety is that a person is dealing with, it is largely unchangeable by the patient or the therapist, especially when it is an extreme automatic reaction to certain triggers like travel anxiety is. And so, what that means is that every single thing they are taught in school is based on the premise that your patient will never recover, but you can help them feel a little bit better. In other words, you can help them cope through indefinite therapy, right? So, let me just ask you kind of like a simple little question, right? Like, would you want to hire a mechanic to work on your car who didn't know how to fix your car, who was never trained how to fix your car, who was only ever trained to kind of fix your car? I mean, I don't know about you, right? But I certainly wouldn't, no matter how nice that mechanic would be. That's not the person I'm going to fix my car. Now, the second big thing that is keeping people from getting really good results in therapy and has been for hundreds of years, this is still going on today, is what's called the non-directive principle. So Freud's entire theory was that if you just simply sat someone down and you let them talk and talk and talk, and if the therapist did not intervene with any direction or advice, that the patient would eventually arrive at new conclusions on their own and work through their issues, right? So he literally referred to this as the talking cure. And Carl Rogers built on this idea in the 1950s with his mandate to all therapists to hold unconditional positive regard for their patients. Basically, the idea of like just sit there, be kind, be nice, wish them well, don't judge them, hope that they change. And his whole idea is if you just hold that space long enough, that they will change. Not exactly the most direct approach, of course. And so, even though today's modern therapists do offer some advice, it almost never really goes beyond their standard set of go-to tips and tricks that really only offer mild coping at best. And the other thing, too, is that when they're offering advice, it's never in the form of like concrete, direct, step-by-step instruction. It's usually very passive suggestions, right? So because they're trained to simply give people very mild passive suggestions, the whole therapy process takes so long. It becomes a very arduous, lengthy process, right? And so the chances are that you've probably heard therapists say some of these like standard 4 to 5 like go-to things. Like you've probably heard them say something like, let me teach you a breathing exercise you can do. Have you tried meditation? You just got to get yourself out there. You're going to feel more comfortable with time. Let's try some tapping. Try to think more positively, right? These are common things that a therapist will say that, yeah, like they're nice, but it doesn't really help you actually solve the problem. It kind of creates this sensation of like, yeah, but how? How do I do this, right? And beyond that, therapists are literally taught in school to be like a mirror, reflecting the patient's thoughts and feelings back to them for further exploration. And that's why you've probably heard things like, how does that make you feel? Tell me more about that, many, many times before. And the bottom line here is that there is a major mismatch between patient and therapist expectations of what the purpose of therapy is. So, patients usually want a plan of some kind. They want a roadmap to recovery and feeling normal again. But the thing is, no therapist is ever trained in how to provide their patients with a true roadmap for lasting recovery. But therapists are taught that no such map exists, right? They are only ever trained in how to help a patient embrace a lifetime of coping. And patients believe that their therapist has the plan, or that some therapist out there somewhere must have a plan. But the truth is that there is no plan, right? In fact, the therapist believes that you have the plan hidden somewhere inside of you, if at all. And the only plan is for you to keep coming to therapy and to keep talking with the hope that eventually, and probably almost accidentally, you're going to feel better. And, to be totally clear, this whole non-directive approach, it does work for some people with some issues. This can be very helpful for processing grief or some forms of isolated trauma. A portion of the population is able to feel sufficient relief from just talking about it enough. But, again, as we saw, the data from the NHS tells us that less than 49% of people report experiencing sufficient results with talk therapy. And so that leaves the majority of people kind of hung out to dry. So I find that to be a little bit alarming. And the thing is, the people who keep trying it, who don't get very far, they think it's their fault. They think it's a matter of, oh, I'm just not in the right fit. I don't have the right person. I don't, it's not the right personality match. Or they think that the relief is going to come eventually. But if so few people are getting satisfactory results, why in the world are so many people staying in therapy, right? Continuing to try to deal with it. And really, there's kind of three main reasons. The first one is that it's perceived as being free or seemingly low cost, even though you end up spending countless hours there, years of your life wasted, not dealing with it, right? I mean, like if you've got travel anxiety for 3 years, that's 3 years of missed experiences. You're not getting those 3 years back, right? Those 3 years of seeing the world or doing things that you might want to do that's now gone. And also, there is an hourly cost to therapy, even if your insurance covers it, right? Like, what is an hour of your time worth? People forget that your time has a dollar amount associated to it as well. So there is a cost, certainly. Number two, it's usually like all the client really knows how to do, right? They keep hoping that some breakthrough is going to come eventually. They're holding out hope that it's part of the therapist's plan, basically. And it's just all that they really know how to do. Those are the three main reasons why. And again, I want you to imagine that your car is broken down, right? Imagine it's not functioning properly. You can't get from A to B, literally, with in the case of travel anxiety. So what do? You go to a mechanic, and the mechanic tells you, well, I tell you what, your car is never going to function fully the same way again, but here's what I can do. You can keep bringing your car back into my shop every week, and we can talk about it. Maybe you will figure out how to fix it yourself if we talk about it for a long enough period of time. I'll give you a few things you can kind of do to make it more pleasant. We can put an air freshener in there. I'll wipe the windshield for you. Some people do start to feel better about their broken cars after a while of coming here and talking about it with somebody for a long time. So you might find it helpful too. Oh, and don't worry, your car insurance is going to cover the weekly appointments. I mean, does that sound like a good plan? I don't really think so, right? So the two major limitations of the broken patient myth and the non-directive principle, they're kind of just baked into the therapy model and all of the different variations. Even with these new variations of like DBT, MDR, and so forth, it's still very limited. It's still based on this whole coping idea. And so people tend to only learn how to cope. Now, I do want to be very clear. I'm not coming for therapists here, right? I'm not coming after therapists. I deliberately chose not to become a therapist for these reasons. I wanted to get people the results that I had gotten and that I knew was possible. So I didn't want to go have some professor like tell me for 4 years that people can't change when I had proof that they could. I wasn't on board with that. And I want to just be very clear, like the vast majority of therapists, they're incredibly caring, very intelligent people. They're just doing what they've been trained to do. And many of them are my colleagues. I would even consider many of them my friends. And a good chunk of them are very effective at helping a portion of the population deal with certain issues. But I also see their struggle and frustration in trying to help a portion of people that they're just not trained on how to deal with. And it's not really their fault. They don't know how to help you. More importantly, it's not your fault that the whole process is not getting you what you want. If you have tried therapy and found it somewhat valuable, but far from sufficient to deal with your travel anxiety, I just want you to know you're not alone. The data shows that the substantial majority of people are just like you. Okay. Now, the third thing that's happening in the mental health industry lately is pretty fascinating, but also very scary. Now, if you're anything like I was when my anxiety was at its peak, if you've already tried therapy and medication and those didn't really work for you, then you've probably tried to solve the travel anxiety problem yourself. So, especially in the last 10 years or so, people are trying to be their own therapist or mental health coach by turning to the vast abyss of the internet for answers. And if you're like most people with substantial travel anxiety, most of your time on the internet is probably spent in three main chunks, right? So the one chunk is that you're probably compulsively Googling And you're probably doing this where you're compulsively Googling the probabilities of safety versus danger for any form of travel, thinking through every worst case scenario in your mind and trying to use the internet to find every piece of information you can to confirm that there is zero chance of danger, only to find information that makes you even more concerned. Number two, you're probably doom scrolling, through funny, distracting, meaningless posts or games as you're leading up to a trip, just to try to help your mind temporarily be distracted from the looming fear of being away from home, waiting to pop up again. Or third, you probably end up looking for real, tangible answers, on how to feel better, only to find cheesy, surface level content that makes you feel good for an instant or that makes you feel seen or validated. But after months and months of consuming it, your life still looks exactly the same. And so your social media feeds are probably littered with all sorts of motivational, pump up, feel good social media posts. Mental health influencers are like a dime a dozen. And I'm curious if you know why. The big reason why there's been such a huge explosion of all these like mental health influencers is because so many people like yourself are struggling emotionally, and the type of content that they engage with is content that simply validates how people currently feel. So you maybe have seen a post like this before, right? Like, in today's world of constant stimulation, it's inevitable that you will feel overwhelmed. It's not your fault that the world is designed to make you feel anxious. It's okay not to be okay. Don't let anyone ever tell you differently. And if they do, it's time to say goodbye. This is a friendly reminder to take a breath, be kind to yourself, and send positive energy out into the world. Of course, you've seen posts like this, right? Because they all sound like this. And most people are completely unaware as to why there's so much content out there that sounds like this. It's because this post is strategically crafted not to give you a true step-by-step system for recovery. It is designed to get you to click the like button. It validates how you already feel without giving you any real way to address the root of the problem. So either that, or you will often see a post like this. Here's 5 signs that you actually might have XYZ exceptionally rare condition you've never heard of. Number one, you feel tired when you wake up in the morning. Number two, you feel hungry multiple times a day, especially after several hours between meals. Number three, you often feel stressed when thinking about day-to-day responsibilities. Number four, you disagree with others from time to time. So this type of content is what's causing more and more people to self-diagnose themselves, right? So a 2023 study found that 1 in 4 Americans have self-diagnosed a mental health disorder based on information from social media, with TikTok being a notable source. Now, that was several years ago. So I'm sure it's probably risen, excuse me, a lot more even since then. And what this is doing is it's causing people to believe that they know what the real underlying problem is when they really honestly just have no clue, and neither does the person posting the content usually. Um, I consult with people all the time who tell me that their travel anxiety is through the roof, but they are totally sure that they have to keep doing their exposure therapy or that they need to use their daily affirmations. And I have to remind them very lovingly, but very firmly, if they knew what their real problem was and how to solve it, they wouldn't have the problem anymore. Right? The fact that they still have the problem is evidence that they have a blind spot and they're enthusiastically running in the wrong direction. And the reason why your feeds are littered with this stuff is because influencers know the vast majority of people are far more interested in just trying to feel understood and they are just trying to have some kind of an explanation for what their problem is. But the big trend that we've already started seeing in recent years, and the gap is widening, it's going to be massive over the next 10 years. There's going to be people who continue to prioritize validation-based information over transformation-based information. And the people who do that are the ones who are going to stay stuck indefinitely because they will confuse information that makes them feel good for a few minutes or feel seen with the information that's needed to create a lasting recovery. And the people who prioritize transformation based information are the ones who are going to win out for sure. And I want to be very clear, right? I'm not knocking all mental health influencers. They're just doing what they're incentivized to do. They create content that doesn't require any knowledge of psychology at all, doesn't require any even experience on how to actually help people solve these problems. Most of these people, by the way, are just people who have opinions about mental health, and they're putting out content that reflects their own feelings about mental health. It is not based on any kind of empirical evidence or any real lasting experience helping people with real issues. But they can put out content that gets massive engagement, massive followings, and then they're able to monetize the platform in whatever way it is that they need to make their quick buck. And they don't have to worry about a long-term reputation because they can just make money off their audience immediately and then, go and do their next thing. And they're only teaching band-aids, not really how to address the root of the problem. That's kind of the big issue. And this is a big reason why my team and I have strategically not focused on building a massive social media following, but instead we've ruthlessly doubled down on making sure our client success is really through the roof. And there's nothing wrong, I want to be clear, with eating like some candy every once in a while that just makes you feel good for a few moments. But eventually you've got to get your vegetables, right? If you want to be healthy and prevent disease. And the willingness to go beyond the surface level and address the root problem is what separates the people who merely want to recover from those who actually will. So if our goal is simply to retrain the brain to stop having automatic anxious thoughts in the first place, the question we want to ask ourselves is, why don't we just do that instead of focusing on all this stuff that doesn't work? Right? Why don't we just ignore the stuff that's going to give us the band-aid solutions? And why don't we really focus our time and our energy on solving the real problem that needs to get addressed? So that's where we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, what is the method that does work when nothing else does? And I want to introduce this to you in a simple way and help you understand that if you are really serious about not just managing your travel anxiety, but really learning how to overcome it, then there really is one simple concept that you have to understand. And this key concept is really what enabled me to finally overcome my own anxiety and stay anxiety free for so long. And I've never seen an exception to this with the 612 client successes that we've had. So the first key concept you've got to understand is what we call the formula for peace of mind. And I know that sounds sort of silly. It might sound like I'm exaggerating here to say there's a formula for peace of mind, but if you'll bear with me and just try this on for size, I think you'll see that this works. So the formula for peace of mind is when your current life conditions, which basically just means like how your life is right this minute, when that matches up with your subconscious rules for life. And that's when you're going to feel peace of mind. And by the way, you don't have to take my word for this either. You can verify if this formula is true by looking at your own life experience. So just try this on for a second. In your life, there's probably at least one area where you are generally satisfied. So it could be your health, could be your finances, could be your business, could be your marriage, could be your relationship with your kids, or at least the relationship you have with one of your kids. Okay. Not everybody is fully satisfied in every area of life, especially if anxiety is in your daily life, but we all tend to have at least one area we are pretty satisfied with. And, hell, it could even just be like one friend you have in your life or the house that you live in. So you don't have to overthink it. So just ask yourself, like, what is one area in your life that you feel generally at peace with? And I'm going to use a real example here while you kind of hold in your mind your area. So this is a client that I had a little while ago who had severe travel anxiety. Her name was Janelle. And Janelle has actually shared her story publicly with us. We did an interview with her on our website. You can see it there. And she's given us her blessing to talk about her situation. So when I asked her what an area of life was that she was generally pleased with, she had said, my family. I love my relationship with my family. And I said, great. What is it that you love about your relationship with your family? And what she said was, well, they are always kind and supportive of my goals and dreams. They have always been there for me during tough times. We spend a lot of time together, which is really nice. And I said, great. So let's just imagine for a second that hypothetically, all of a sudden, your family didn't agree with you pursuing your goals and dreams anymore. Just imagine that took place. Imagine that you go through a challenging time and they're not really there for you, okay, in addition to not supporting your goals and dreams. And then imagine also that they don't really want to talk with you about it. They don't want to, be there for you when you're going through this tough time. Imagine also that, thirdly, they all of a sudden have a bunch of new interests and hobbies without you, and they stopped being as available to spend time together. If all of that happened, if their behavior changed like that, would that make you anxious, do you think? Is what I asked her. Would that cause you to ruminate on it? Would it cause you to be like in your head a little bit about the issue? And she said, "Oh, yeah, absolutely." And the reason why it's not causing her anxiety currently, but it would cause her anxiety if that took place, is because some of Janelle's subconscious rules for her family were that they should support her goals and dreams. They should be there for her during tough times. They should spend a lot of time together. And those rules had basically become a big part of Janelle's subconscious beliefs because of her own past experiences, where she slowly developed beliefs about what families should or shouldn't do, right? And what I want you to get is that that's all a rule is, by the way. It's really just a subconscious belief about what has to happen. That's it. So, because this area of Janelle's life matched up with her subconscious rules, she felt happy about her relationship with her family. She did not feel any anxiety or unrest around her relationship with them. She didn't spend any time in her head thinking about it. But if these core subconscious expectations were to not be met, then you can absolutely bet your bottom dollar that it would cause Janelle anxiety. Her mind would be ruminating about her family a lot. She would be having thoughts like, what happened to us? Or why won't they understand? Or did I do something wrong? And so on. If she was in that situation, the anxiety would become more and more consuming as her mind tried to find a way to balance the formula, trying to find a way to get her life to match up with her subconscious rules again. Okay, does that make sense? So if you look at the things you have anxious thoughts about, it's because there is an unmet set of rules, I promise you. Now, they are probably subconscious, meaning that, you are unaware of what they are, just like Janelle was unaware of her subconscious rules as well, but they are there. Okay, so more on that in a second. So I was able to show Janelle why she was pleased with her relationship with her family. But when we took a look at Janelle's travel anxiety, it really became clear that there were a different set of subconscious rules that were really just not matching up with how her life was currently in certain situations. So, she told me that as soon as her family had a trip planned and wanted her to come, her mind would start racing immediately, right? She would want to know every detail she could about how far away the airport was, how long they would be in the air, which airline they were taking, and so much more. Her mind would start to imagine like every worst case scenario imaginable. She would continuously have thoughts of like, I don't think I can do this, or I just can't, and so on from there. And so, what I helped Janelle do is uncover what her subconscious rules were that were causing the anxious thoughts in the first place. So, we uncovered that some of Janelle's subconscious rules were, I have to be 100% certain that of what will happen in advance. I have to be 100% certain that I won't feel anxious while I'm traveling. Everything has to go according to plan while I am traveling, and I need to feel comfortable the entire time while I'm traveling. So I'm curious if you can relate to any of these beliefs, right? These are probably some of the things that you also believe deep down too, but I doubt that you ever knew that these were things that you believed. And that's kind of entirely the point, that they are subconscious. And so these are the most powerful things driving your every thought and emotion, but we are all unaware basically of what they are. And so this means that Janelle had, like we all do, a set of subconscious rules about what has to happen, while some people have rules about what has to happen that keep getting violated when it comes to work, their family, or their marriage. The subconscious rules that kept getting violated for Janelle revolved around travel. And those rules had to be met. And if they weren't, she couldn't function or proceed with the travel very well, if at all, right? And the rules that she had for her family were being followed. So she felt peace of mind there. But the rules that she had for being able to travel were not being followed consistently. And so she felt very anxious and dysfunctional. So it's kind of like having a computer that only knows how to run a program according to a very specific set of rigid conditions. As soon as you give the computer input that it is not prepared for, it glitches out. So let's take this one layer deeper. Basically, what I had to teach Janelle in order for her to overcome her travel anxiety was what every person who truly wants to do so has to learn. I had to teach her how to rewrite the rules of the subconscious game that her mind was playing in order to make it winnable. Okay, now what does that mean? Well, what I want you to do is imagine for a second that you are playing a board game for the very first time. Okay. And in order to play the board game, you simply need to do two things. Excuse me, you simply need to know two things. The first one is you need to know the goals of the game. And number two, you need to know the rules of the game. And basically, if you follow the rules on how to accomplish the goals, then you win. If you fail to follow the rules and you do not accomplish the goals, then you lose. Well, what if I told you that you have been basically subconsciously playing your own game of life according to a simple set of rules ever since you were a child, and that every moment of your life your subconscious is basically trying to win that game. Okay. And when you feel like you are winning, you feel happy and you have zero anxious thoughts. When you feel like you are losing, then that's when you start to experience anxiety. So let's return to Janelle. Let me show you how this works. So for Janelle, within a few hours, I basically helped her uncover all of her anxiety causing subconscious beliefs. And what we found out was that before she started experiencing anxiety some years previously, her old subconscious values were the following. So before she started experiencing anxiety, her old subconscious values were fun, number one, family, number two, and growth, number three. So basically, what this meant was that the rule book for her game of life when she was young was basically having fun is the most important thing in my life. As long as I'm having fun, life is pretty good. Beyond having fun, the next most important thing is my family. If my family is doing well and we are having fun together, then life is really good. And while fun is most important and family is also important, I also need to make sure I am growing as a person. As long as those three things are there, life is fantastic. All right. So she developed these beliefs over the course of her early life. And some of it she adopted from the role models of her parents. Some she took from the culture she grew up in, from her spiritual beliefs, her education, and from other mentors and examples she saw along the way. And just like it happens for all of us, her belief system formed over time as she made tons of subconscious decisions about what was truly important to her and what was not important to her. So you see, if you put all of our beliefs together, what you get is a model of how the world should be. And when life equals our subconscious model of how the world should be, in other words, our rules, we feel peaceful and happy. When life does not equal our subconscious model of how the world should be, our rules, for a moment, like if it doesn't match up for a moment, then we will feel frustrated or sad or angry. When we feel like life substantially and consistently does not match up with our subconscious model of how the world should be, then what we do is we feel the sensation of anxiety as our mind struggles to figure out how to get them to match. And when we conclude that life will never match our subconscious model of how the world should be, that's when we start to feel depressed. And that's it. That's where all anxiety and depression comes from. I've never seen an exception to this. Every time we balance out the subconscious rules, every time we rewrite the rules of the game, the anxiety goes away. And if somebody's dealing with depression, that goes away too. So for quite a while, right, Janelle was living a normal, happy life. And that's because the set of rules that she had before, it was pretty easy to get to match up with reality. She was the one in charge of being able to win her own game. and the rules were relatively easy and simple. So all she really had to do was get her life to match up to the core expectations of prioritizing family, having fun, growing as a person. So it was pretty simple, pretty easy. But then something happened to Janelle that happens to every person who experiences anxiety. Without her realizing it, her subconscious rules changed. And for her, it happened in response to what we call a significant emotional event. If I remember correctly, for her, it was feeling unwell on a trip, which then caused her first panic attack. And what Janelle didn't realize was that when she had that significant emotional event happen to her, her subconscious was literally rewiring itself. Okay, because after all, the subconscious's number one priority is to keep you alive, not necessarily keep you happy. So what happened was that Janelle's subconscious values, in other words, like the literal priorities of her nervous system, they changed into basically the following. So number one, her number one priority was now feeling 100% certainty. Number two was to feel safety. Number three was to feel comfort. Four was success. Five was family. Six was fun. Okay. And her rules for certainty, just to kind of give you a sampling of this, became I have to be 100% certain what will happen in advance. I have to be 100% certain that I won't feel anxious while traveling. Everything has to go according to plan while traveling. And then also, I need to feel comfortable the entire time while traveling. So now what happened was basically Janelle's subconscious rules for life were the number one priority I have is to be 100% certain that I am healthy, safe, and okay. I cannot feel safe or comfortable, let alone function or focus on family, fun, or success until I am 100% certain that I am okay. And I can only be 100% certain if I know what is going to happen in advance and there are no surprises or changes. I also need to feel fully comfortable through the whole process of traveling, or else I just cannot do it. So, can you relate to this? Can you relate to kind of these belief systems? Maybe Janelle's story a little bit more than likely you can. What I want to ask you is, what do you think is the likelihood that Janelle will be able to consistently have her life match up with those new rules? Basically, about 0%. All right. So before the significant emotional event, Janelle felt peace of mind because her subconscious game of life was winnable. In fact, she felt that she was winning at it almost every single day. But when the event occurred and her brain rewired itself, the literal priorities of her nervous system became different without her awareness or her permission. And now her mind was compulsively trying to get a whole set of rules to be followed that were just never going to be followed consistently. And as a result of her mind requiring things that were never going to happen in order to function or focus on anything else, her mind continuously felt anxious. So, basically what I want you to do is imagine I sat you down in a chair and imagine I made you play a board game. And you cannot leave from your chair until you win the game. So you must try your hardest to win. But the only way you can win is if a whole series of things that are outside of your control and that violate the laws of nature take place. Could you see how anxiety inducing that would be? You see, anxiety is nothing more than your mind trying to win an unwinnable subconscious game. And so for Janelle, anytime she was going to try to travel somewhere new, her mind would be going, well, I have to know how things are going to go in advance. Oh, but I can't know for sure what will happen in advance. But I have to know, but I can't know. But I have to know, but I can't know. And that back and forth process is anxiety. That's anxiety in a nutshell. So when we have a set of subconscious rules wired into our mind that inevitably conflict with how life is going to be, we end up chasing our own tails inside of our minds perpetually. And I want to make a point here that is really critical to understand. It's not enough to acknowledge that you have unrealistic expectations. Okay. Every person with travel anxiety knows that they have unrealistic expectations and that they should let go of them, basically. But they also feel that they just can't. You know what I mean? And do you know why that is? It's because those expectations, those rules, are hardwired into the subconscious. It's not just a something you would like to have happen. It's that your nervous system believes this has to happen in order for you to feel calm, safe, and to function. So knowing that you shouldn't be governed by the rules is never enough to actually make the change last. And sometimes people think that it is, and they get just as confused as they were before. So think of it this way, right? Like if all it took for us to make a lasting change in our nervous system was to simply become aware that we should stop running our old pattern, then there would be no people who want to quit smoking but don't quit smoking. There would be no such thing as someone who overeats. And we would stop worrying about what we can't control as soon as we realize that it doesn't make sense to do so. So becoming aware of the rules your mind is governed by is only really the very first step. And that means that until you identify each of the subconscious rules that your mind is operating by and rewire them, you will always have anxiety. But once you do uncover the subconscious rules that your mind is operating by and you rewire your mind to follow a new set of obtainable rules automatically, that's when the anxiety will disappear. So, for the sake of simplicity, I've really only shared like some of the most important parts of the subconscious rules that Janelle had that were causing anxiety, but there were dozens. And it always takes a couple hours to like dig each one of them out of the subconscious and map them all out. And what I've found over the years is that there really are only seven core types of anxiety in the world, but each person has their own slightly unique version. So for some people, their rules revolve around things like, I must be perfect or else I am not good enough and worthy of love. I must please others or else I am not good enough and worthy of love. I must take care of others' problems or else I am not good enough and worthy of love. And for people with travel anxiety, the core subconscious belief system usually is I must be certain of things I cannot be certain of, or else I cannot feel peace, or I must control things that I cannot control, or else I cannot feel peace. So, again, like just let me remind you that anxiety is nothing more than your mind trying to win an unwinnable subconscious game. And that means that until you identify the subconscious rules that your mind is operating by and rewrite them, you will always have anxiety. But once you do uncover the subconscious rules that your mind is operating by and you rewire your mind to follow a new set of obtainable rules automatically, that's when the anxiety will disappear, which is really cool. Or at least it's only ever worked whenever I've taught people with travel anxiety how to do this. So if our job is to rewrite the subconscious rules that your mind is operating by, what you want to ask yourself is, how are we going to do this? Are we going to do this by talking every week for hours on end about our childhood, our triggers, and our feelings? Are we going to get that by screwing with the chemicals in our brain and trying to numb ourselves? Are we going to get that by basically just allowing the anxiety to exist and trying to let it pass by? Are we going to get that by just trying to white knuckle it and do exposure therapy? Are we going to get that by just trying to jam as much positive thinking as we can in our head? Are we going to get that by meditating every day or journaling about our feelings or doing any of the other silly things people do because they just don't know what else to do, like sucking on hard candy, box breathing, cutting out caffeine? The answer is no, because every single one of these strategies is simply a way to respond to the anxious thoughts. And what you want to do is remember this, right? The only way to get the anxious thoughts to disappear is to rewrite the unwinnable rules in the subconscious. So you see, when Janelle's subconscious, when Janelle's subconscious believes I cannot feel certain, safe, and calm unless I know what is going to happen in advance, that is basically like the trunk of the tree. So the trunk of that core subconscious belief is now going to sprout all of the anxious thoughts from it, like, well, how far away do we have to drive? What if something happens to the plane? Do we have to go? What if I start feeling anxious? What if I can't do it? And basically like 100 other variations from there. So what we can do is we can either use coping mechanisms to try to trim all of the tiny branches one by one to temporarily forget that they are there, or we can chop the trunk of the tree down. And by the way, there's not just one tree, right? It's more like there's like an orchard of trees that need to be chopped down. But once we chop them down, then we're good to go. No more branches. So we don't have to focus on 100 different anxious thoughts a day for the rest of our lives just to get through the day. All we really have to do is we have to identify every anxiety causing belief, otherwise known as a rule. Number two, eliminate the unwinnable rules, the unwinnable beliefs. Number three, we need to simply retrain the brain to follow a winnable set of rules by default. So, what that looked like for Janelle was that meant we rewired her subconscious, excuse me, to basically look like it did before the travel anxiety was an issue. So we retrained her brain to no longer require these things that were not possible for her to obtain in order for her to feel safe. And we rewired it to automatically focus on the things that were truly most important again. So for her, that ended up being family, fun, career growth. And then we also got rid of the requirement for certainty, for safety, and for comfort, with the big emphasis being on making sure that we got rid of the requirement of feeling totally certain about things. So by doing it this way, no longer had to do any of the daily maintenance she was doing before. She no longer had to have coping mechanisms to respond to her anxious thoughts. She didn't need to meditate or do breathing exercises leading up to a travel day because there really were no thoughts to try to get rid of anymore. And so in about 90 days, we got it so her brain was following the new rules by default, which was pretty cool. And again, we want to do all of this in just 90 days, right? We don't want to spend years on this. We don't want to spend all of this time analyzing and dissecting and ruminating. We just want to get the brain rewired and get you back to living the life that you have always wanted to, but anxiety has been keeping you from. And again, that basically rules out all of the strategies that everyone else is teaching, right? Remember, you don't have time for coping. We can't put you in a position where you are constantly responding to every anxious thought that comes up. Those strategies take forever, usually don't even work after years of trying them. If you have major travel anxiety, then it is a big problem now. It's affecting your marriage now. It's affecting your children now. It may be affecting your career and earning potential now, depending on if you have to travel for work or if you would need to travel for your ideal job. It's maybe affecting your sleep now, affecting your social life and quality of life. Certainly, it's doing that now. So if you're dealing with travel anxiety, your coworkers, your spouse, your kids, your family, your friends, they need you to be at your best now. For Janelle, her family just couldn't really understand why she wasn't able to go on vacations with them. It was creating a wedge between her and her relationship with her family and her sister and just becoming a big issue. And she knew that if she was going to eventually have a family of her own one day, she didn't want her own family to be limited because of her own limitation, right? She didn't want that to be the big issue. And so if you have an issue like this, if you have travel anxiety, it's an issue that needs to be dealt with right now. We don't have time to just, sit around and wait and hope that the therapy is eventually going to kick in or the new medication's going to start working in 3 months. I mean, if we wait 6 months or so to try to deal with this, you could end up losing what's really important to you by then. I have seen some examples where anxiety has cost people a job, a relationship, even a marriage from time to time. So everyone's a little bit different, but there is a very real cost, that we can't afford to have you continue to incur. We've got to make sure that we deal with that. The bottom line is that we have to rewrite the subconscious rules that your mind is following, and we got to do it now, right? So how do we do that? What does that look like exactly? Well, when we talk about rewriting the rules that your subconscious is following, imagine that you have this board game that you're currently frustrated with, and you keep trying to play it, but you keep losing. And so what you do is you come to me as a board game expert, and basically I use my spiffy checklist to help you identify each and every one of the problems that's making the game unwinnable. Then what we do is we systematically rewrite the rules so that your mind automatically follows the right guidelines. So we uncover your existing set of rules, After all, we can't really change something that we don't even know exists in the first place, of course. And we don't have to guess, right? After seeing so many hundreds of travel anxiety cases, it's very easy to predict and identify the underlying beliefs that might be causing the issue. Number two, we go through the checklist of the 7 types of rules that cause anxiety, and we systematically remove all of the old rules that are causing you to lose. Third, we actually set you up with what you need to be able to play a winnable game, right? So we set out what your new belief system needs to be in order to ensure that you absolutely get the life that you desire. And then fourth, we use conditioning strategies, not coping strategies, to train the brain to adopt the new rules by default so that you don't have to think about it anymore. And this new way of doing things is very awesome for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's a proven process. So I've been teaching this successfully and consistently for 8 years. And that's why we've become an industry leader and others are taking notice. Quote, studies support that anxiety is a learned response and it can be unlearned through brain retraining techniques. That's from molecular psychiatry. Quote, our research shows that with the right tools, the brain can be conditioned to respond differently to anxiety, enabling long-term relief. That's from the University of College London. This is also awesome because it takes you from feeling deeply anxious to anxiety free in just a matter of a few months. So even with extreme anxiety, it's always just a matter of identify, eliminate, rewire. That's it. Rewriting your subconscious beliefs also is something that you have been doing your whole life anyway. It's just that you've never known how to do it intentionally. And after all, you weren't born with the belief of I can only feel safe if I never leave home again and if I know with 100% certainty what's going to happen. You weren't born with that belief that came later on in life. And you never have to worry about managing your anxious thoughts ever again because you are dismantling the underlying beliefs that are causing them in the first place. The other reason this is great is there's no band-aid solutions, right? There's no dredging up tons of drama from the past, no talking in circles, no uncomfortable exposure, no excessive use of willpower just to kind of push through, no more repression. And basically, rather than feeling like you are adding more things that you have to do in order to get through the day, now you are actually letting things go. So it's like finding all of the pebbles in your shoe and removing them instead of just taking painkillers to be able to walk. Okay. It's also awesome because it doesn't make you reliant on a therapist or a prescription or even me, right? You now are playing the game of life from the inside out, where you are in charge of how you feel, instead of from the outside in, where you require things outside of your control to go a certain way to feel okay. And you learn a set of skills that you will never forget. You become immune to relapse because the change is hardwired in your nervous system, and you know how to keep from adopting any limiting subconscious beliefs in the future. You can teach this to your spouse, to your kids, breaking a generational cycle of mental health issues. And rather than the vicious cycle of anxiety, you tap into the virtuous cycle where everything continues to improve. So Janelle's social life and the life with her family improved because they started doing more things together that added variety to their lives, which was really, really cool. So I want you to kind of see how powerful this is, right? Like, imagine the relief that would come from you eliminating all of those anxiety causing subconscious beliefs that you've collected over the years. Imagine what would really finally be possible. And what most people don't realize is that every anxiety causing subconscious belief is it's basically like an emergency brake being pulled. So what people try to do is they try to jam on the gas to get what they want out of life, but they perpetually feel held back. And they have no idea that what is holding them back is subconscious, right? Because they don't know what's holding them back because they can't become aware of it because it's subconscious. And I want to warn you too, a little word of warning. Our copycats always mess up two main things. They always mess up the subconscious belief identification piece, as well as the elimination and replacement piece. And what that means is that they end up providing a lot of just surface level strategies that simply help people respond to and manage their thoughts rather than keeping them from coming back in the first place. And that creates a lifetime of coping. And what I want you to understand is that if you do this the right way, This has worked to not only keep myself anxiety free for 15 years, ever since I was hospitalized, but it has worked for the past 8 years. I've been doing this professionally and for 612 clients just like you. And it's really going to keep working for another 8 years because the human brain just doesn't change. So I've done this with clients as young as 13 and as old as 84. It doesn't matter how long you've struggled one bit. It doesn't matter what kind of anxiety you're dealing with. Most people aren't dealing with just travel anxiety, but that doesn't matter, right? We can always root out the beliefs that are causing the problem and that are unique to each person. So if you've been looking at all of the coping strategies and feel good content out there, but it leaves you feeling a little empty, perhaps like there's a piece missing, maybe it leaves you kind of thinking like, God, I just don't really want to have to deal with this forever. I just want to be normal again. Can someone please just give me something tangible and common sense that I can implement right away? I'm telling you, there is a way to get your brain to feel content and think positively by default in just about 12 weeks without having to rely on ineffective coping mechanisms and without being dependent on anything or anyone long term. And that's why we've been in business for 8 years and why we have the best track record of results in the entire industry. We don't get sucked into the fads. We don't get sucked into the trends. We don't try to hack the social media algorithm. And we don't prioritize clicks and views over transformation, right? We have built our entire methodology on what doesn't change, and that is human psychology. And more importantly, we make our clients feel taken care of from start to finish. And that's how we're able to take them from deeply anxious on day one to automatically feeling content and thinking positively by default in just 90 days or less. So at this point, you do have a choice available to you. On the one hand, you certainly can keep trying to do those coping mechanisms that don't work, that you don't like, that you've already been trying for who knows how long. You can keep doing the same thing and hoping that something changes, which really is the definition of insanity. You can keep hoping something changes on its own, but we all know that hope is just not a strategy. It's not a strategy at all. Hoping without execution is delegating the responsibility and the power to something or someone else instead of being the one in control of where your life and mental health is going. Or the other thing you can do is you can rationalize that now isn't the right time to do this and allow yourself to kick back onto autopilot where all of your current patterns of thinking take back over. And before you know it, another 12 months or more disappears. I mean, when is really the right time to finally get the mental health that you deserve, right? The answer is always now. What in the world could be of a higher priority than to make sure that you are no longer literally limited in terms of where you can go on planet Earth? I mean, it is only your life that we are talking about here, right? So if you do finally want to get the mental health you deserve, that's completely obtainable and that hundreds of others like you have already done, here's how we're totally happy to help you accelerate the process. I have set aside some time in the next 24 to 48 hours to speak to you personally about how you can apply these ideas for your specific situation in your mental health today. And we're going to get a lot done on this free call for you. So, firstly, on the call, I'm going to help you identify what the major subconscious beliefs are that are causing the anxiety for you. Number two, I'm going to help you identify the ones that you need to replace it with. Third, I'm also going to help you get clear on the top 2 to 3 conditioning strategies that will help you make the changes automatic. And then four, I'm going to hand you a proven roadmap to lasting recovery and relapse prevention, which will be really cool. So it is just a phone call. It is just about 25 minutes. I'm going to be showing you, though, in that period of time, a lot. We're going to be covering a lot of ground. And I'm going to be showing you the exact steps that you can take to overcome the travel anxiety for once and for all. And I'm going to custom make for you a roadmap so that you can live every day with calm, peace, joy, and the ability to be present for the ones that you love. Okay, pretty cool, right? And here's my, dastardly evil plot. My goal is literally just to convince you I can help you by actually helping you. Okay, is that fair enough? Right? That's really how I like to operate and do things, is to lead with offering value and helping people. And my promise to you is that this call is going to shave years off of the learning curve of finally getting the mental health that you desire and that you deserve. And that is really the reason that we do this. We want to make sure that you're not getting pulled astray by any of these outdated tactics that don't work. And we want to make sure that you're only being taught the stuff that's proven, that's tried and true, and that really beautifully sets you up for your mind to stop having automatic anxious thoughts for good. Okay. So I recently had a gentleman who left this comment on my website after he had seen a couple videos like this and then done a call. He said, I can't tell you how many times something you have said I have felt on an atomic level. This is what I've been craving for from years of therapy and never received. Right. So that's what people tend to tell me. It's flattering, but it's really just about showing you what works, and once we show you what works, then it's all of a sudden mind blowing, even though it's really simple. And the cool thing is that getting your travel anxiety dealt with at the core must be a must for you to book a call like this. So I do want to be clear. So these calls are free, but there is a catch. Okay, so these are who these calls are for. Getting your travel anxiety truly dealt with at the core must be a must. Please don't book a call if your anxiety is pretty much under control. If it's not really like a big priority for you to get it dealt with, just don't bother. Because what ends up happening is if it's not really a priority for you to fix this, then you're just going to take up your time and take up my time. You're not even going to use what I teach you. You know what I mean? This process that we are going to use with you on this free call is so powerful that we want to make sure the only people who are booking appointments are people who are going to implement it, right? So please don't do that if you're not really in that much of a priority level to get the issue dealt with. And then number two, not only must it be a must for you to get the anxiety dealt with, you got to be coachable. You got to be willing to implement what I teach you because this model is so simple and so effective that every person who implements it is really going to get control over their travel anxiety. We don't want anyone taking up a time slot who isn't going to implement what we teach them because it robs someone else of a guaranteed change in their quality of life, right? So just go ahead, click the button under this video to grab your spot. A quick window will open. It will take you to a booking page that looks something like this, and you can choose the appointment time that you want, and I will call you at that time. If you are watching this on social media, you may not see a button to click, but you might see a comment section. And so simply type the word session in the comments, and we'll go ahead and reach out to you via Messenger and book a time with you for a time that works for you. And spaces are very limited. The calendar does fill up fast, so just go ahead and grab your spot now. And in closing, I just want to say, thanks for hanging out with me. And also, listen, the ability that I've showed you how to do, how to identify, eliminate, and replace the anxiety causing beliefs in your subconscious. This is the single most important thing that you can know how to do to live a life without travel anxiety. You can, of course, spend the next 5 years trying coping mechanisms that have already been proven to be ineffective, hoping that something changes on its own, or waiting for some like magic moment when it feels easy and just right to tackle this. Or you can use a very simple process like this. Very often people will say to themselves things like, yeah, this sounds great. And, I do need to fix my travel anxiety, but I'm going to do it, after my daughter gets done with her recital, or I'm going to do it after the kids are out of school, or I'm going to do it after, the vacation with my family, next month or whatever. And one key thing that I think is important to understand is that we often convince ourselves to not put ourselves first because we think that we need to put other people first. But what I've learned with anxiety is that if you've got anxiety limiting your life, it is affecting every person around you. And so, ironically, not putting yourself first is actually the most selfish thing that you can do because then the anxiety now becomes something everybody else has to revolve around and like it becomes a limitation on the whole family system. So just be careful with that whole justification of like, yeah, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait until, it feels right, until it feels ready. I can tell you also, like, waiting until you feel ready is the whole thing that anxiety is doing to you. Like the fact that you're in a cycle of trying to wait until you feel perfectly ready and perfectly certain is the problem. That's the problem. So you have to start breaking that cycle eventually. You have to start training yourself to be able to move forward without having 1000% certainty, because you're never going to have 1000% certainty. It's just not going to happen. So you can spend your whole life in a waiting room, or you can move your life forward, right? So that's the key thing. And when you do it this way, right, just remember, when you follow this simple process, it is the simplest possible approach. When you do it right, it's the only system that ensures that you deal with the problem at the root and that you establish your long-term independence, right? No crutches, no band-aid solutions, no roundabout passive strategies, no temporary pump-up BS, just rewiring the brain to think positively by default in a way that sets you up for a lifetime without travel anxiety. So you can show up for those you love in the way they are craving to see you. All right. I'm Ty Hicks. Click the button under the video below or go ahead and type session below, and I'll see you when we chat soon. Take care.